How do we gauge the success of Stellar? How do we gauge the success of their team, the mission? Do we go by price, transactions? Well, let's start exploring how we exactly measure success with Stellar. Now, obviously, we could measure success with price. And I've got Bitcoin, XRP, XLM up on the screen right now. And you can see that they generally follow the same patterns, with XLM having some larger percentage increases than the other two. But when you zoom in closer and you start looking at the time, you can see that they all follow the same pattern. So when we're looking at measuring success for Stellar, it's kind of hard to use price as an indicator because it's being moved so heavily by Bitcoin, right? And the closer we zoom in, you could see that all of these moves here, they're all very similar. The whole sector is trading the same. That would be like saying that the entire stock market trades the same. No, different sectors trade the same, but the entire stock market doesn't trade the same. But you can see with crypto, there is no separation. So to judge success of Stellar by their price, I think that's going to be very, very hard to do, considering the entire market right now trades at a bundle. So the price isn't just reflective of Stellar, the price is actually reflective of all the cryptos out there. All right, so that's success in regards to price. But again, the whole crypto market is trading as a bundle. So we have to look at some other stats here to see really how successful Stellar is. Because once that market starts trading like individuals, right, the actual individual sectors, because remember, each crypto represents a different technology out there, a different application and use case, all right? So once those separate, that's when the market is really going to be mature and ready for movement. Now let's look at this. So measuring success, what about ledger performance? How many transactions we've done on the ledger? In January, February of 2022, we had 596 million, okay? Almost 600 million. That blew away the previous 2 months of 440 million transactions. So if we go by transactions, Stellar is actually doing a really good job. And what's important to think about with transactions is this. I want you to think of purchases, remittances. I want you to think of Visa. Just put Visa in your head right now. Not every Visa transaction out there is big. A whole bunch of people just go in there, use their Visa card, right? They go, they pay for something, they pay for a coffee, they pay for a quick snack, a quick meal. Not every transaction is big. So when people are looking at the transactions processed on here and they go, but Klaus, come on now, these transactions are microtransactions, there's nothing to it. They still use the same amount of gas to process. And it's still the idea of building up the network in terms of transactions, right? What people actually use, how they use their crypto. So when we look at this network stats and ledger performance specifically right here, we can see a dramatic increase of people actually using the network, transactions flowing on the network. And remember that whole Visa thing, okay? Yes, we would love to see the average transaction amount flowing across go higher and higher, but how does that benefit any of us? If a transaction is 10,000 USD or $1 USD, the gas fees for Stellar are going to be the same. So it doesn't matter if this network is fueled by microtransactions or larger financial transaction amounts. It's still propelling the network at the same rate in terms of gas fees and the native hold'll pressure that it puts on with this fee pool. And you can see the fee pool right now is at 2.6 million lumens. That's the amount of gas that has been transferred in the network as a total right now. Measuring Stellar's performance with transactions, I mean, it's looking really good. It is. So once this market starts separating, right, once we get maturity and people understanding there's different sectors within crypto, then they're going to start looking at stats like this, deeper level 2, level 3 organic stats that are going to tell you more and more about the success of a network. All right, so now we're going to switch gears just a little bit here, and we're going to talk about what Stellar has been investing in, right? What have they been putting their time and money into? Because we can also determine success of Stellar by how well are the projects that they are funding doing. Let's explore that. All right, so let's talk about startups, right? Because that's what Stellar has been investing in. Here's another one. Stellar Development Foundation launches $30 million investment fund. The fund will match investments in platforms that use Stellar blockchain. They're targeting fintech startup companies, and they have been really targeting Latin America recently. So now let's talk about that concept. Stellar investing money into startups. How risky is it investing into startups? Well, I have some facts for you in terms of startup rates, right? Because if Stellar is using these lumens and they're using in SDF specifically. We're going to talk about SDF and kind of how this all applies to with rating. But I want you to look at this most fascinating startup rates in 2022. 90% of startups fail. 75% of venture-backed startups fail. That's crazy. Under 50% of businesses make it to their 5th year, so forth and so forth. So as you can see, a bunch of startups fail. An estimated 90% of new startups fail. How many startups fail? 34% close within the first 2 years. So investing in startups is actually super risky. And remember, these startups also have to turn a profit. They can't always take money in. They actually have to be their own generating entity. So when it comes up to actually turning a profit with startups here, is 30% of startups break even, with only 40% of startups actually turning a profit. How crazy is that? So even these investments that SDF is making into the startup way of doing things, okay, that's what this $30 million fund is for. And remember, this is going to come out of their Lumens fund. They are investing in these startup fintech companies, and a lot of them are tackling remittances. So again, it's really hard for these startups to make it. The success rate is very, very low. Now, the field that they're doing this in is remittances, all right? And let's kind of tie this in because we're going to talk about, again, rating Stellar. So Remittance Facts. The highest remittance outflow countries in 2019 were the United States with 68 billion, United Arab Emirates with 43 billion, and Saudis with 35. The global remittance market is 685 billion. Stellar taps into this remittance market, right? That's why they are so big with MoneyGram and now MoneyGram and Techstars, all right? But again, Techstars, that program is to help startups, okay? And again, this is all in the fintech remittance, right, transaction world here. And again, that transaction world goes over into the Stellar ledger performance, right? We could see that happening. But when we start looking at these, right, we start talking about startups, all right? We start talking about remittances and how big the remittance market is. We can measure the success of Stellar by their success of their partners that they invest in as well. Stellar, does the SDF team have enough foresight, have enough abilities within their team to be able to pick apart these companies and say, hey, which ones are going to be good ones to invest in? Because remember, if like 30, 40, 50, 60, 90% of these startups fail, that's a lot of lumens that could just be going to waste investing in fintech startups. And that's why I had the startup data up here on the screen, because Stellar is going after a lot of startups with this specific round of investment. So by judging Stellar, we can, yes, definitely judge them by the success of their investments and the success of their partnerships too. You know, and now that we're talking about ways to measure success, I think I have to do justice here, and I have to talk about market cap. Now, again, market cap, you have to be careful because think of someone like Tether. Tether just keeps printing and printing and printing, very much like the U.S. government, the Federal Reserve. So is that really a true market cap if it's so diluted with printed stuff? So market cap, you can't put full weight in, but we still have to look at it as an important metric to judge the whole cryptosphere on. Stellar right now got it up on the screen, ranked 31st. Remember when Denelle Dixon took over, Stellar was ranked 10th as market cap, okay? So again, we talked earlier about cryptos trading as a whole, but now we have to see that Stellar has now gone from a market cap at 10th, now down to 31st right now as of March. What am I at right now? I'm forgetting my days. As of March 21st, 8:22 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. 31st, 10th to 31st. So I think we could definitely use this stat here to measure the success of Stellar, because we could look at it this way. As Stellar slides down in the rankings, right, that means other ones up there, right, they're moving up, they're taking attention away from Stellar, they're taking money away from Stellar. And for those of you out there that think that, you know, all these cryptos aren't in, you know, some sort of competition, well, you'd be wrong. They are. Because we know 90% of these cryptos aren't going to make it here in a few years, right? Just like the dot-com bubble burst, you're going to see the same thing happen with the majority of these projects here. They will become rug pulls or they will become dormant. And so seeing Stellar slide down in market cap, that definitely is a way we could rank Stellar. And that's obviously a bad ranking, right? When we've seen them slide from 10th to 31st. Other tokens stepping up. You see Doge and SHIB, things that have zero utility, that are taking away from Stellar, right? They're taking energy and oomph away from Stellar. And before we tie this all together, I've got one more article to share with you, and it is a breaking story article from Stellar. So let's get to that because it is going to tie everything we've been talking about here today all together. Let's do it. All right, so I've got an article here that is going to tie all of this together. Learn at how ARF1 is using the Stellar network to increase remittance flows. Yes, we've talked about remittances in this, right? And how that is an extremely important way because that is how Stellar MoneyGram is working. But I want you to look at this article because I saved the goodies for the end, all right? Remittance flows are one strong determinant of overall economic health of low and middle income countries. Yeah, so they use remittance flow, okay, to determine how strong a economic part of a country is, right? Especially that segment. And you think of cash-based societies, okay? 800 million people are dependent upon remittances to sustain their livelihood globally. That's 800 million people out there that can benefit from the use of Stellar. Now you're like, well, wait a minute, why benefit? How so? In the current financial system, all right, they pre-fund, okay, which means these settlement places, right, your MoneyGrams and so forth, have funds on both ends of the fiat table. Okay, for these remittances. They own some, say, pesos, and they own some reals. Okay, they got both of them. Okay. In the current financial system, pre-funding operates as a patch to overcome the shortcomings of the corresponding banking networks. We know that that's our traditional banking networks. And the settlement speed varies from 1 to 7 days. So think about the risk of money floating for 1 to 7 days. And now not only is it floating, but it is transferring from two different fiat markets. Let's keep going with this. However, pre-funding creates even more problems in the system as it entails high capital requirements, high fund transfer exposure, and increased financial and treasury operations because cross-border payments are dependent on the networks such as SWIFT. Yes, and we know it's happening with SWIFT, BRICS, Russia, and Ukraine. I told you this story would tie everything together. Now remember, there are long settlement cycles and pre-funded capital acts as a barrier to growth. Why? Because you have to put that money into the system, right? You have to put it into the system for it to happen. Crypto, instantaneous settlements, you would not need that pre-funding. Why? Because the settlements would clear both sides as fast as the user would get their money. Instant settlement on both ends. And here's another good benefit in this article. Another benefit of using ARF network is significantly lowering fund transfer exposure with instant settlements by providing API-based real-time local fund transfer rates. An estimated, listen to this, an estimated 1/3 of managed pre-funding in local currencies in a year is lost due to currency fluctuations and a lack of real-time fund transfer services. Oh my, 1/3 of that managed pre-funding. Remember that I was telling you about that they have to own money on both sides, right, of that fiat on and off ramp, okay? 1/3 of that is gone due to fluctuations in local currencies. Think about that. So now think of how Stellar can improve upon that, right? With instantaneous transactions, no more 1 to 7 days settlement time. You'd be able to settle instantaneously on the receiver end of both the bank and the end user receiver. That is impressive right there. And it would be able to save how much money? An estimated 1/3 of that money, the pre-funding money, is lost. That could save companies tons out there. So measuring success with Stellar is, well, not as easy as we thought. But you could see you could use a bunch of different metrics out there to build the story, right? To build the story of Stellar. And it is important to build that story because right now, remember, all of crypto is trading as this bubble. And once the market matures and sees the different use cases within this bubble, you are going to see Stellar and the other cryptos, especially gaming ones, you're going to see them separate even further. You're going to see them separate in their own functions. And that's why you need to start looking at these other organic stats that we have been showing you up on the screen. And the ARF1 story, yep, ties it all together and ties Stellar as a whole together in terms of looking at it success-wise. Now, before we go, I wanted to leave you with some ideas to think about. What about the SDF team? What about holding them accountable? Because now remember, SDF, right? They're not accountable to us in terms of price, okay? So you have to completely get rid of that. They are a nonprofit. They are accountable to their mission, right? Global financial access to the world, right? Giving the unbanked and the underbanked a chance to have every financial service, okay? Is SDF filling their mission? I mean, how do we judge them? Right? We've already seen that, Stellar, the market cap has gone down. We've seen that the price has gone down. We've seen transactions on the network going up. But we've also seen Stellar invest in projects that haven't yielded any results yet. Yep, some of the early investment projects that we've seen from Stellar haven't. Now, we've seen some great ones, right, like Litemint. Okay, we've seen some good liquidity providers on the network. We've seen some of the stuff like that. But not every project that Stellar is invested in has actually yielded more users on the network. All right, explore the blockchain a little bit, take a look out there, look at some of the tokens on Stellar, see how often people are using them, see the amount of money that they're putting through it. I looked up the eNaira, that's some interesting one, that's a Stellar one. But yeah, go through those programs, take a look at them, and let me know. Let me know your thoughts below, right? If we're going to be sitting here, if we're going to be rating Stellar, we have to look at the whole thing. We have to look at SDF, we have to look at, token usage, what they're invested in and so forth. So again, a little longer video out here for you, but I wanted to put some thoughts in your head about Stellar that just a lot of people aren't talking about. So Klaus from Crypto with Klaus, hopefully you enjoy this kind of stuff, and I'll catch y'all later.